Welcome back. This is Daybreak, and thank you for staying with us. In the course of this broadcast, we'll sample your feedback. The hashtag on X, formerly Twitter, is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdulkadir. With me in studio still, Andrew Kamili, Angel Mbudhia, Anil Ogutu, Philip Pande, Kuria Maina, and Ivy Mushoki. Now, according to NACADA, a number of people are using Bang, and this has increased by 90% in the last 5 years, according to its report by 2023, last year, that is. And among the persons aged between 15 and 24 years old, where apparently a majority fall here, 193,430 individuals, according to NACADA, are currently or actively using cannabis, with significant link to depressive disorders and many consequences thereafter as a result. Well, I begin with you first, Angel, as a former university leader, still, of course, active.
Yes.
Given these statistics, which have been provided by NACADA, an agency that monitors how drug and substance abuse normally happens in the country, what are the leading causes? I mean, what drives young Kenyans and the other Kenyans, of course, to this level of consumption, which is so appalling and dangerous in the long term?
First and foremost, there is something called peer pressure. And one thing that young people get to subscribe to is what they do with each other. And these are social amenities that people partake when they are together. And that really prompts a lot. Even when you look at the use of alcohol, it mainly begins even at our families, in the family stage. So the exposure coming at a very young time or a young age, even when you're not even allowed to consume, but you can see your parents consuming with their friends and so on and so forth. So you think it's quite normal, and when it gets to a very critical issue like NACADA is raising, then now that becomes an issue. But then there are so many other surrounding factors that affect the use of drugs in Kenya. And when you look at young people across the country, drugs are more accessible and affordable today than ever before. Even when you look at, when the president opens up the borders of the country, we are now open to things like drug trafficking and so on and so forth. So I think there's a lot that needs to be done in that space, in the aspect of campaigning and public education for drugs. And I think NACADA has metamorphosized since it was established in 2001, going all the way into today. It has done quite a lot to improve that. And seeing them launching the campaign against drug abuse in Bomas, and I'm looking at their page on X, and I'm seeing half halls at Bomas, and I'm expecting to see a full hall of young people in Bomas. And even getting to know that even that campaign was taking place is something that we're even learning today as the young people of Kenya. The other thing is how NACADA operates. It's an authority that is domiciled under the Ministry of Interior and National Coordination. I do not see why NACADA should be domiciled in that ministry. It is an agency that deals with public education and campaign for the youth, targeting the youth of Kenya. It is not working with agencies like the National Youth Council and the State Department for Youth, and agencies like the National Youth Service should be working with NACADA against drug abuse. So when we see that they are not working with the agencies that deal with young people across the country, then that is where they will not be able to have a better campaign than they are having. Even having young people from political parties is something that they should consider embracing. Their strategy for going to the grassroots level to get this message of drug abuse and drug avoidance to the grassroots level is a strategy they need to rethink. I think they're still using the old models, the old strategies. Now there are better digital platforms to talk about drug abuse. We are seeing a lot of illicit brews. We are seeing a lot of fake liquors in our stores, outlets today. And NACADA is typically charged in ensuring that such brews do not make it to the market. And if they do make it to the market, they're able to raise a flag. I think they need to work better with the agencies that deal with youth in the country, then to work with student leaders at universities, work with young people like even Philip Opande and Ascon here. They are youth leaders who command a lot of following. I think even Philip, if he runs for president today, he will not gain less than 1 million votes. And he is not at the Bomas Week, 2 or 3 billion. And he's not at the Bomas Youth Week, drug substance against, what is it? The theme?
Drug and substance abuse.
Drug and substance abuse week at the Bomas. I think they should have, they can do better, and we are here for that.
All right. Anil, well, I'll come to you, Philip, because there were 8 million Kenyans who did not vote in the last general election, more than what even the president had garnered in the presidential vote, and a majority of that number are young Kenyans who apparently cannot even speak their mother language. So it tells us a lot about how our voter demography is changing, and therefore if well put in terms of order, then that is somewhere that any young Kenyan can tap into. Anil, coming to you, as a serving president of the law school at the Catholic University of Eastern Africa, we'll come to the policy aspects, the family level, the society, but why are universities and higher learning institutions apparently appearing to be dens or hubs for drug and substance abuse among many university goers?
Okay, first of all, I understand my brother, Mr. Pandey, is running for president. Let me declare my interest to deputize him. But be that as it may, if you look at these universities, or rather higher institutions of learning, you come to realize that most young people in these places are, number one, stressed, and they are going through a lot, to lack of better words. But then, I will not entirely pin this, or rather blame the institutions placed to fight drugs like NACADA and so on. Let me not marinate the truth and bring it out in a way that most people will like it, but rather say it bluntly as it is, that all this, whatever NACADA does or any other organization does, all this comes down to the person. And the person, I'm talking about the friends that a young person has. If your friends cannot hold you accountable, then you are openly going to get into drugs, because things get tough. And the reason why we all make it to universities and all that is because through the system of education, you have been tried and tested and approved to be able to, handle stress and things that come in life. But then if you do not have an army of people who are willing to hold you accountable and hold you accountable to your decisions, or rather influence you positively, then you will fall down, you will fall into this. Because at the same time, as much as there's peer pressure, there is the positive part of peer pressure, where you can get people who really have your best interest at heart. Instead of, any inconvenience, you want to go and unwind, or rather to go and engage in getting high. Well, these same people can hold you accountable in that any inconvenience, you guys can go and do some sporting, you guys can come up with ideas. I have friends who have come up with sustainable ideas that are, known worldwide right now. Just to mention but a few, one of the best startups that I've seen by Benaya Pundu, as a former schoolmate of mine, were gotten in universities, and these things are more or less decisions that a person makes at a personal level. NACADA will do the most it can. They will organize these conferences. They will bring people. And guess what? After the conferences, what happens? They can go back and drink. They can go back and smoke and do all those things.
But what then is the contributory factor? Because beyond the boardrooms, there ought to be the triple effect of these policies having an impact on young Kenyans and generally the country. Why are we not having that impact felt on the ground? What needs to happen beyond the boardrooms?
Well, beyond the boardrooms, we should realize that these things cannot be implemented by the virtue of people sitting in suits and discussing the future of youth. The youth need to get involved, and not just involved in a mirage way, but actually being involved in policy creation and also execution, or rather implementation of these policies on the ground. Now, if you look at that report by NACADA, I'm so sure not more than half, or rather even a quarter of people who are supposed to vote for Mr. Pandey here, have seen it or have read it. Young people are not exposed to these things, this research that is being done, or so on and so forth. So it needs to be, the young people need to get involved in the process.
Philip, coming to you then, how does the university leadership, I mean, I'm sure there are caucuses under which the likes of Angel, Anil, has gone, all of you at some point had served at the university leadership. How then can you counter that, having identified peer influence as one of the major contributory factor as to why many young Kenyans are subscribing to drug and substance abuse? Then at the university and college level, what can the leadership do to intervene and lessen that number, or even curb it in totality?
Very well, Before responding to your matter, I think there is an ongoing campaign here on whether I should run or not.
Well, you're granted by the law.
And we'll consider that. Absolutely, it's within our rights. Fortunately, if I were to do that, then gender would be a huge consideration. So Angel here would win, being my deputy. We'll have that discussion. Okay. But anyway, on the subject on drug and substance abuse, Ayub, the picture on the background is such a disturbing one, and the writing on the wall is concerning. I served as a student leader for a full term, and I would dare say that Saturday mornings were busy mornings for us, because you'd be bailing people out or responding to distress calls on people in police cells that apparently were apprehended in, sherehe spots, or had caused trouble or found themselves on the wrong side because they were either consuming or abusing some sort of drugs. And so, having come through that background, I fully understand that our universities and colleges are not safe havens. Actually, if you ask me, a majority of young people that succeed through high school and miss beginning using substances at that age, then fall prey to drugs in the universities, because they have all the freedom, they have the money, and they have the influence. And at some point, if you ask my colleagues here, if any of them is using any of the drugs or alcohol, for example, they'll tell you that they can remember the event, they can remember the friends, and the spot when they began using such substances. So it's that practical, yes, that in our colleges and our universities we begin consuming. But even responding to the need on toning down, the need on addressing this issue, student leaders are playing a critical role, not just bailing out friends out of police cells or those who have caused trouble in using substances, but again in campaigning, in peer counseling, in peer mentoring. But like Angel mentions, there is a weak link in terms of coordinating these efforts through NACADA and institutions. One successful campaign in our universities and colleges is a campaign against HIV and STIs. Okay. And you walk across, halls of residences and, even washrooms, you'll find dispensers for condoms. But what is the campaign against drugs in our universities, in our colleges? Okay. And how is NACADA and all agencies that are concerned with addressing the issue on substance working and, closely coordinating with young people that are taking the day-to-day leadership at college and university level? I would dare say that the bulk of the responsibility is either left with this Dean's office or the Office of Counseling Services, offices of student leaders such as my friend Anil. And there's very good examples of universities and colleges that we need to embrace. I was at the Catholic University a good part of 2023 organizing the East African Employability Summit. And the behavior in that university is impeccable. You look at students who are in charge of their faculties. You look at Anil here, and a majority of them, not in drugs, not in substance, but taking on leadership and responsibility. Okay. So I would also want to advocate for exchange programs and, best practices emulation. We talk about, peer review of curriculum. But there is supposed to be also peer review of our standards. Okay. What is the Catholic University of Eastern Africa, for example, doing to tone down on drug and substance? What is the practice at Kabrak? Okay. And how do we then translate that to public institutions and even TVETs in our communities? Okay.
Kuria Maina, coming to you, and of course you do represent the Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education Teachers in Murang'a County, in central Kenya for that matter. And we are seeing a significant increase in terms of alcohol and drugs epidemic attributed to unregulated bars and cheap illicit brews. I mean, we are now off the university, and again still outside the confines of the varsity or the higher learning institutions, still young people are susceptible. They still go to these illicit brew dens where they consume and, in fact, risk their lives. How can this be countered? Because the speed seems to be accelerating, but there are no countermeasures from the university leadership that is commensurate, and also from policy perspective outside to curb this menace where young people are falling vulnerable and day by day appear to be on the verge of losing the decency of how life is ought to be.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the first thing that the government ought to do is to declare drug abuse as a disaster in our country. Because I remember when HIV and AIDS came through, the first steps or the first strategy was to declare HIV and AIDS as a disaster. And then once we declare drug abuse as a disaster, then we lay down strategies. Like the first strategy would be we make a unit in the university level about drug abuse. You remember when we were in university, HIV and AIDS was a common unit for all students who are there. I believe even those who are in school are still doing so. So we need to embed our curriculum and ensure that all the way from the elementary learning, from down there in elementary, that is primary school, all the way to high school level. For instance, we had a task force that was tasked by the president to review the education sector in Kenya. I think that would have been really one of the key issues that should have been embedded in the curriculum, because it is really hard to control drug abuse at adult life. You know, people who are above 18 years old, they have already succumbed or they have really become addicted. So I think we need to start at the base level, down there. Yeah. We embed our curriculum with the proper drug abuse education, and then from there we will be good, because we will have already started, teaching our young children that the effects and the damage and the harm that is produced by drug abuse. The next strategy is having a multifaceted approach. Okay. For instance, there's a time we had a Chamber of Commerce audition in Muranga. We invited the regional manager, Nakada, in Nyeri, and he came and he talked to the people that we were having meeting with. So I think drug abuse should really, or the combat should be multifaceted, okay. Whereby all the stakeholders are involved. For instance, we have all ministries, for instance, all government agencies, all the semi-government, all semi-autonomous government agencies should come into place. And all of us should be involved in this. Another point is that we're having weak control systems, particularly in Mount Kenya. I think even the Deputy President mentioned this, that we are losing many youths to drug abuse, particularly illicit brews. We have seen many people dying in Kirinyaga. Another lot died in Kiambu. So I think we need to control our security agencies, need really to up the game. And I think it is high time, because there is conflict of interest. I don't understand how people who are endowed with the responsibility of taking care, making sure there are no illicit brews, are the same people who are still propagating the same businesses. Right. I think we need to start from there, and we need to tighten the belt. And we also need to have punitive punishments, because we are losing a generation. And I think when you lose a generation, we are having weak force, that we are going to have a weak human resource in future. So I think we need to come together. All stakeholders need to be involved. I think the problems of youth, the solutions are with the youth. I think NACADA, we have Tobacco Control Board. I haven't seen youngsters in those boards. So I think it's high time we really also include the youth, because these strategies, when the strategies are put in place, the people who are implementing don't have any relationship with the youth, and they need really, the youth need to be put into place, because they are the only people who are able to blend in and understand the problems that the youth are going through. Okay, I'll be coming to you, because here we have a sequence of teenagers, according to NACADA, who are more likely to use alcohol and marijuana if they see their friends post about it on social media. Then comes high school education, university. If we identify these problems at the university, do we then risk failing to get the history behind it of the sequence of this abuse starting as early as probably in high school, where by the time there is the university admission in progress, then this person is already
an addict, then how do we address this complicated scenario from the university leadership perspective, the institution of parenting, and also the government, because it's a convergence of these efforts that will help curb these problems?
Thank you so much for that question. First of all, I want to just say that we need to first categorize these substance abuse drugs. We need to put them into context and to understand exactly what these drugs are. Then after this is get to understand what is the scientific component, chemical component that is in these drugs, and what are the effects that it has on a human body or human organs. So what am I saying in this is that our universities need to also partner with research institutions and rehabilitation centers, so in order for us to understand how this product or how this kind of substance abuse is affecting our young generation. Then one of the few things, actually, I was just talking about this earlier on last week, is that we have realized that our parents don't understand that times have changed. The eras are changing. We are in a society where AI has already taken place. We are already in a society where robotics are the next future of analytics. So how is it that we are going to now start integrating this generation of our young people from the ages of 10 to 12, being exposed and being privy to information, and also trying to incorporate our parents and telling them that we need to start educating our young ones on this kind of systems. So these systems, if we put them together and we try to incorporate them through our generations of our parents and also the generations that are coming up, then we'll be able to create something that we call a diabolical framework, where young people will not be forced to go into drugs or substance abuse because they'll be busy trying to find, because if you look into the substance abuse, you'll see that there's a chemical component known as dopamine that is normally induced in these substances. So you'll find that young people get addicted to that dopamine. And that if we're able to redirect this energy or redirect this kind of substance or chemical abuse that they are doing and incorporate it into things like AI, technology-based, finding out sustainable ways of living, they'll be really basically focused on trying to enhance their living or life or their lifestyle. So what I'm trying to say is that our parents shouldn't stop our young ones from dreaming. They should just try to incorporate their dreams in a way in which that can help them live sustainably. Because most of the times when you go back into these homes, you find that the young person is being depressed on becoming something that their parents maybe wouldn't want. Maybe their parents would want them to be lawyers, doctors, but we're in a generation where AI has taken over. You can become a millionaire just by doing blockchain analysis. You can become a millionaire by understanding or propagating scientific or climatic conditions, getting to understand what are the climatic systems. How can I predict the future of what is to come? So this is where we are at, and I feel that our generations are clashing. So there needs to be integration. And from what my brother there is saying, he's talking about there needs to be a task force created within the systems, within the governments, within the NACADA systems. This is a task force that can be able to coordinate young people on how it is affecting the local communities and how we can be able to help our young people with regards to substance abuse.
Yes, Andrew.
Part of the reason why drug abuse is a big issue in Kenya is because of how complex we talk about it, how we look at it is a whole scientific thing that sometimes even escapes the audience that we intend to address. You'll realize that my colleagues here are talking about NACADA. While I will give a pat on the back for the number of decisions that were made earlier, but the complex fashion in which they're executing their ideas escapes the target person that they want to address their issues. You know, when you talk about NACADA and you go deep down in Mathare, I'm not sure, you know, the candidate who is supposed to be getting the attention from NACADA actually knows that is NACADA existing. When you talk about the government ideas around dealing with drug issues, I'm not sure, maybe a university student would be able to know, but a university student is just a percentage of the demography that intends to be addressed. So my most correct way of dealing with the issue of drug abuse in Kenya is to simplify the manner in which we address it, to simplify what drug abuse is, to define it in a way that is understandable for most of our target audience. Now, two things. There is the most important thing is how to deal with drug abuse, the law, the regulations, the policy. You will remember that the 5 p.m. and the 11 p.m. regulations were introduced by NACADA. And the effect that has had on drug abuse in Kenya is quite amazing. Initially, or when we were growing up, people would drink from Monday to Monday, from what time to what time, nobody stopped you. But today, you have times within which bars can operate. You know, you don't just access a bar before it's 2 p.m. or something like that. And that has gone a very long stretch in dealing with drug abuse. That speaks to the question of regulations, the law, and policies that I was addressing. They are simple measures, but they're actually impactful. When you start looking at it in a very complex fashion, you lose it. You'll remember, and I'm happy the president of the Catholic University Law School is here. I went to the Catholic University Law School. There is a place in Catholic University called Bugani. In Bugani, is an epicenter, or is a point of convergence for almost all universities. The Kenya School of Law students come take their lunch there, Catholic University and all many other universities come there. There was at one point when bars and wines and spirits were introduced in that space. When initially Catholic University, by being a university that is run by the Catholic, had not allowed that. And within a week or two, the environment was totally different. You'd meet people, falling in the streets and they're drunk, which was never there. But when the university took a step to stop this and demand that all the stalls in Bugani that was stocking drugs and alcohol were to be closed, it has been different up to now. And that is not more than 3 or 5 years ago. So that is the level to which simple decisions can actually change the course of how we deal with drug abuse. Part of the reason why we have not been able to find it right in how to deal with drug abuse is because, one, what my brother alluded to, we have chiefs and police officers who were charged with the responsibility to deal with drug abuse when they're the ones who are selling this. Why don't we ask ourselves the question, how did we get drugs into the university? How does bang get into the university? Because this student came from Kirinyaga or Oyugis in my village and to the University of Nairobi halls, and he finds that there's somebody who brings a bang here every evening. He's never done it, but he sees his friends doing it. So that's how do
he does not, or she does not understand the consequences.
Yes, how do they access these drugs? And let me tell you, it's not about how intelligent a person is. The Judicial Service Commission is dealing with drug issues. The judiciary itself is dealing with drug issues within its system. The LSK is dealing with drug issues in engineers, it's all over. Professors in the university are struggling with alcoholism. So it's not pretty much about how intelligent a person is, and it's not also entirely about how a person can make decisions. These people have been able to make good decisions before, but it's also because of the factors that Angela alluded to. You know, peer pressure, you don't have no jobs, you're going home, your wife is looking for money from you, your kids are supposed to be reporting to school, and then somebody tells you, oh, my brother, tuingia hapa, piga tu mbili, utasikia kama imepungua pressure. You know, such kind of factors that then demands that we try to look at this thing in a deeper way, but the responses should be very simple. That then if you were to start education on drug abuse, how will you start educating people? How will you talk to them? How do you fashion your material so that then the person who receives this information does not receive it as if you're attacking them, but they receive it as though you're teaching them. You know, you'll remember that when HIV/AIDS, which they have actually pointed out clearly, came around, the posters that when we were growing up were seeing were very simple. I mean, they were very simple. You'd read it as a child and you could understand firsthand. You don't have to be told this is what HIV/AIDS is. You only knew there's something called HIV/AIDS. It deals with people, and the consequences are death. Have we told our people that when you have when you abuse bang, these are the consequences? We're only hearing that people go mad, but nobody actually knows. Nobody has seen somebody go mad, and an example has not been shown to them that somebody has literally lost it because of bang. We need to make it that clear that, well, enjoy the bang, but these are the consequences. Enjoy the alcohol, these are the consequences, in a simple fashion that is consumable for the right audience.
And, the message ought to be more persuasive, and but straight to the point. You also mentioned the fact that peer influence can be at different levels because you've mentioned different professions, so it cuts across. It seems to be a common denominator. Okay, and questions about how the drugs will end up in the universities, for example, and how authorities at their level have been unable to, or this passing under the radar undetected. But Angel, and ladies and gentlemen, this is the question then. In the first place, let's address it from the source. How do these drugs end up in the country?
In the country, I like that question. And one of the biggest examples we have is Tobacco Control Act, which has had a lot of backlash over the years because it has had a lot of cartels surrounding it, and Kenya has been dealing with tobacco issues before even the country attained independence. And when you look at the Tobacco Control Act, it only came to effect in 2007. Since the country had gained independence, it was only at that time that there were clear regulations to regulate the consumption of tobacco across the country. And that has always been marred by political turmoils in parliament, where the giants who manufacture tobacco come into play and bribe our parliamentarians and have them delay passing of that kind of law that will curtail their sales across the country. So there is a very political reason to why we have drugs across the country. And even when we talk about taxation, we look at it as a double-edged sword. It's good to tax luxury goods like alcohol and tobacco, but when you tax alcohol so heavily, then you make people, users, go into illicit brews that now leads them to death. So we really have to rethink what we do as a nation, because we have to control what we consume. If it is tobacco, you cannot say we are going to do away with it. It is a luxury that should be enjoyed by people if they want to, of majority age, and who can afford it responsibly. And I think our laws moving on have become very clear that tobacco consumption should not be made available to persons under the age of 18. Yes. And as my colleague here had said, it's very difficult to regulate someone who is above the age of 18. Yeah. We have to go back to the basic family level. We have to go back to the grassroots. That is where we all find there's always that drunk uncle, there's always a drunk father in a family, there's a cousin who was very brilliant, but once they started using bang or substances, their careers went south. So the family is the basic unit of the aspect of drugs and the abuse of drugs. So I think that is a strategy we need to rethink as a country, how we penetrate into our homes to get the message of drug abuse and abstaining from them. And I think the other aspect I had just mentioned is the placing of NACADA in the Ministry of Interior and National Coordination.
Where can it function best?
I think it will function best in the Ministry of Youth, because even when you have a NACADA project that is being flagged by the CS, it is flagged by Kithure Kindiki, the CS, and he will come in military combat. If he comes with military combat at the university, then students are going to run. That already says we are fighting. Yeah, he's coming to fight drug abuse. Drug abuse has to be simplified, like what my colleague Ascon here is saying. We have to bring it to the social aspect. We have to have a conversation with the community. These are substances that are within us. Even when there's a national crackdown on drugs, the DCI officers will come to you and me to ask us, who do you know? Who is the peddler? Who is? We know who does what and where in our society, just like terrorism. And I also think Kenya should also leverage with its partners. Its international friends are here. The United States has been fighting drug abuse in their countries for ages, in the south, between at their border with the Mexicans. And they have been fighting that for the longest time. We could borrow strategies from them as well. We are talking about 90% of consumption of bang has increased over the past 5 years. Then we have countries like the Netherlands who have legalized the consumption of marijuana. So it begs the question, do we need to rethink our strategy on marijuana? Do we need to maybe pass it, or do we need to look at best practices? Because we cannot live in isolation as a country, and we need to understand that we are progressing into our 21st century, a very dynamic century, and we need to understand how to regulate, to allow it, to regulate it, to control it like any other tobacco and alcohol consumption across the country.
Okay, Ivy, what's the role of the institution of parenting here? What can parents do to be part of this conversation? Because the crisis among also the abuse of drug, substance and drug abuse among the teens is equally worrying.
Okay, first of all, I believe that, you know, as my colleague here said, that the family, the home is the basic unit. It's where everything is taught. It's where you're told, teach a child from when they're young, that when they grow up, they grow up knowing this kind of systems or the kind of acknowledgements that you've taught them as they're growing up. So my perspective of how parents should be able to cope with this is that at the end of the day, they're still humans, and human and man is to error. So they are also prone to these societal norms that are going on. So they also need a bit of training, a bit of understanding on a coping mechanism on how to deal with their children. Because most of the times it's normally you've been brought up in a home, you're expected to do certain things, you're expected to do certain ways, to live a certain kind of life. When I was doing my research, I realized that actually in substance abuse, out of 10 in 100,000 men, it's men who are suffering more from this substance abuse. So my take was, why is it that the man is the one who's suffering the most and the woman is not as much? It's just that I realized that we need to now start drawing attention to why is it the male species is the one that is feeling that they want to even commit suicide? Why is it they're having the want to be able to adhere to these drugs? What are the main issues that are going on in the localized communities that we need to address? And I want to congratulate the Madam Second Lady, Pastor Dorcas, for actually drawing out the aspect that the boy child is going through the most, and they need a certain kind of toolkit to help them to understand what are the issues on the ground, so that they can be able to cope with the issues of substance abuse. And the fact that we have already brought up the issues of female and the women, that we are even championing them at the forefront, the male species also need to understand what exactly is it going forward. How is it that they're supposed to protect their homes? How is it that they're supposed to draw attention to be the man that they're supposed to be? The fitting of a man, fitting the shoes of a man is not that easy. Yeah. So these are the kind of things that as parents in the home, in the homely unit, they need to teach the child from when they are young, so that as they grow, they understand the certain dynamics that needs to present themselves as they grow up becoming an adult. Yes. Yes, Anil, you had a point, please proceed.
Yes, actually, on the issue of how to implement these policies to the people, well, I believe that strategy beats any foe, any day, any time. So we need to have a strategy where we include the youth. And one of the strategies that we can employ is to make drugs and substance abuse unpopular. Right now, if you look at the social media trends and all that, these things are very popular. In fact, people can look at you in a very crazy way if you come and tell them they should not allude, they should not, engage in this kind of drug abuse. But then if you make these things unpopular by including the youth, using youth influencers in this field, where anytime we see Nakada, we see those TikTok guys dancing to something, or rather, including the youth in making sure that drug abuse is unpopular. That is the only way we can fight these things. And the other thing about parenting, well, if you look at most youth nowadays, they rarely are in connection with their parents, or rather the parents have given up, unfortunately. And we cannot blame the government, the teachers in school, or even these people themselves if the parents are not into it, are not into making sure their kids are being brought up to be men and women of principle. So as parents, then they need to make sure that they are bringing people of principle. And lastly, if as young people, I'll draw this back and say, the world is not in need of junkies who get high all day. The world is not in need of professional drunkards who are drunk until it's not a matter of the alcohol in their blood, but the blood in the alcohol. You get? The world is in need of men and women who in their innermost selves are true. Men and women who can stand for the truth even if the heaven falls. Men and women who know the enthusiasm of high achievement, who are willing to go the extra mile, who are willing to engage in politics, governance, sustainable solutions for the future. Because as much as the youth do not form a larger percentage of this current place, but the 100% of the future belongs to them, and they need to step up.
Okay, Philip, I'll come to you, Corey. Philip, Anil mentions the connection points. Therefore, how important is it then for parents to have good bonding with their children, which ought to be organic or natural, because the language, because of the engagement, the opening up, telling the real realities, than depending, for example, by the institution of parenting, depending on the teacher-student bond or the lecturer-student bond or the government or the state, the citizen bond, because the other two can be secondary, but we seem to be not focusing on the primary one, where there ought to be the natural bond, where the good culture, good values, and decency can be cultivated, which will have an impact going forward to produce a citizen who is responsible, other than what Anil mentions as a professional, for example, addicted professionals who, despite their paperwork and academic qualifications and can merit any job opportunity, still might not be as productive as required.
Well, Ayub, the parenting angle is quite vital because as at 2017, we already established through the National Protocol on Treatment for Substance Use Disorders that then the age between 10 to 19 were most affected, that more than half of that population were already in drugs and substance abuse. So you can look at the threshold or the debut that young people making into alcohol and substance abuse. I believe that parenting, and good parenting for that matter, is a factor. How would a 10-year-old begin using drugs and substance? Is either through peer pressure that was mentioned by my colleague Angel in their community. But where do they go back to? They go back home to a family, to an irresponsible father perhaps who comes late in the night when the drunk kid is already asleep, to an absent mom who maybe is more geared towards fending for the family and meeting the basic needs than spending time with the kids. I dare say that some of our parents made the environment so difficult for us to misbehave. And so substance abuse would not be an option. So in your parenting, and most of us young people are getting into parenthood. I have a daughter whom I would not wish to see consuming drugs and substances, especially in the age that I'm talking about. Look at 10 to 19. Now, what am I doing as a young parent? I'm fostering personal development and growth of a young Kenyan that is in charge of their faculties, yes, that is aware and fully aware of the environment, that yes, there is alcohol, yes, there is marijuana and all this, yes, there is nicotine and tobacco that at my disposal I could have out-of-pocket expenditure to go and buy, but my father says no, or my mother says no, or I've been made aware of the effects, the real effects of drugs and substance. My brother Ascon says NACADA is not unpacking the communication, the information to the actual targets on the dangers and the harms of using drugs and substance. Okay. As a parent at home, why don't you begin by teaching the same way we teach basic life skills? Yeah. Drug and substance abuse must be part and parcel of that. The same way we teach leadership, essential skills and development skills in a young person. Drugs and substance abuse must be part and parcel of that communication. The same way we prevent our kids and young ones from, an early debut into sex and marriage is the same protocol that must follow in drugs and substance abuse. Well, Ayub, if we can ensure that we are reducing early marriages, we are fighting FGM and ensuring that girls are not mutilated, that young girls are not married while schooling. Yeah. It is possible that such a practice, such a campaign can tone down on the abuse of drugs and substance. So
upscaling of the campaign is very key.
Upscaling the campaign, unpacking of the campaign and the messages, and personalizing that information at the family and household level, so that when you are grooming and sending somebody out of space to go and interact with their peers at school, then they are not the bad influence. Because we talked about peer pressure. And where is this pressure coming from? Okay. It's coming from an already user who perhaps had their debut at 10 or at 16. And you are meeting them in campus, and they're making you their friend, and they're making you, fall back into that.
Yeah.
So if all of us went through a process where our parents took charge, our guardians took responsibility, then none of us would be predisposed to drugs or would be abusing for that matter. And so it means that the exposure and pre-exposure of your colleagues and peers would be toned down. And so that responsibility must be personalized. That responsibility must be at the household level as well. And just tying up with what Angel mentioned, I do agree that the campaign against drugs and substance abuse must not be a police affair. It must not be a military affair. It must be an educational affair. It must be a sensitization practice. And so the best place to domicile this is the Ministry for Youth of Youth Affairs. It's the Ministry of Education in teaching basic skills and life skills for that matter.
Okay. Kuria Maina, the question of now persuasion, Angel and Philip mentioned of getting the message. But who ought to be the conveyor belt? I mean, in the delivery or conveying of that message. I mean, we are living in a generation where university goers are much more accommodative of influencers, people who are active on social media, getting the messaging, and also choreographing the message in a way that they simply understand. These are people who speak Sheng. They don't understand their mother language, for example, a majority of them, because of the urban setup and the environment in which they are raised in. I mean, do we need to choreograph the message and simplify it, despite being persuasive, and use people who have influence on social media platforms to get this messaging and, in the end, achieve the goal that we want?
Absolutely, yes. As Philip has said, the first teachers during the formative stage of a child are the parents. It's a monkey see, monkey do business. It is hard for a parent who is consuming alcohol to tell their child to stop consuming alcohol. It's also hard for a parent who is smoking to tell their children or their child to stop smoking. I think we should make it a policy where children should not be sent by their parents, for instance, to go and buy cigarettes for them, because it is in this process of sending the children to the shops to buy cigars and all that, they get the curiosity, how do one feel when they smoke and all that. Most of the people I have interacted with, especially young people, they got introduced to drugs through their parents. And therefore, I think parents have a bigger role to play and also ensure that they talk with their children, because as the old saying goes, parental responsibility cannot be delegated. Spend time with the children, understand who their friends are, understand where they are at every particular time, and these will ensure that they don't really get affected by peers. On the second point of the packaging of the message, we need really to package, we need to harness the popularity of our celebs. Like TikTok today, that is the source of information for the generation, the young generation that we have. But do we have the celebs who really are good role models? You hear songs. I think we need to inculcate this in our celebs and also the influencers, because we still have the same people who are encouraging our young people to smoke weed, to do all those drugs, to smoke or to abuse all the drugs that have been aforementioned here before. So I think we need to package the information that is simple, that is precise, that is objective, and that is going to reach, a larger audience of the young people. And also, again, we have said this is not a business of one person or one department. We need a multifaceted approach. We need the Ministry of Education there. We need the Ministry of Interior. We need the Ministry of Youth and Sports and Gender and all that. And then we also need all the professional bodies. I keep asking, we have so many professional bodies. We have doctors, we have KMPDU, that is other doctors, we have engineers, we have LSK, and many other professional bodies. Do they, when they're having their AGMs, when they're having their caucuses, do they take their time in their programs to address the issue of drug abuse? I don't know. Because really, where we're headed, we need really to focus. And as I said earlier, we need to declare drug abuse as a disaster.
Yes.
And then, again, again, the government, during the policy making, because we cannot, we can sit here, all of us, and say we want to combat drug abuse. But the question should go to, are we allocating in the budget money that should go to NACADA? Because, again, we need to empower NACADA. We need, again, to, to focus on the manifesto, on what they're supposed to do. And also, we need really to empower NACADA. We need to go back to the drawing board and really try to edit some of the things that really are curtailing the fight against the drug abuse. But prevention is better than care. I think we should move in an approach that is more preventive as opposed to curing, because curing will cost us more resources, and they're the resources that we really don't have. All
right, and Ascon, coming to you now, the consequences, as we come to the last minutes of the broadcast and sample the feedback from the many young Kenyans, including a majority of them who are young and watching this broadcast, the consequences.
Let me
yes, please.
Let me touch on the question of parenting before I go into the consequences, just briefly. If you look at a common village, the setting of a village, there are probably 10 schools in that village. And in these 10 schools, they are local schools. And out of 500 students in Form 4, let's say 100 on the average, only 3 of them make it to the university, or 10. That is the average figure, 10 or 15, in a common local school. The other 90 are left in the village. Now, these 10 were the most disciplined in their high school or in their secondary school in the village. No wonder they made it to the university. Now, at the university, we are complaining that these 10 are already abusing drugs too much. And we have not asked ourselves, how about the other 90 in the village? Because the 10 were the most disciplined in the village then. Now, how about the other 90 who probably were already engaging in drugs before they could finish high school? They're already exposed to these things, alcohol abuse and stuff like that. I think that is also part of something we need to consider at the policy level and at the government level, that the bulk of the demography that is suffering from this is not just the ones who are exposed to these things at the final stages in the university of their life or at their formative stages, the final stages of the formative stages. The biggest share of those who are hurting are particularly in the villages, the ones who have surrendered their lives into poverty, the ones who are doing border local businesses. They're actually exposed, and the risk of having them at that space for a much longer time is very high. Look at it this way. If we were to look at drug abuse as though it is something that we can talk to people about and have them understand that this is what drug abuse does. What is this drug? When you're told alcohol is a drug, do you think the person in the village actually understands alcohol is a drug? They don't know. They just think the drug on the counter or that is being sold by the chemist, that is what a drug is. If you talk to them and make them understand that this thing is called a drug because when you use it, it interferes with your thinking. When you use it, you become unstable. When you use it, you can't think properly. That is when these people will understand that this is what the government talks about. This is what my father talks about. Or this is what our parents talk about when they say when you use drug, these are the consequences. We need to understand drugs for what exactly they are. When you tell somebody in Mathare today that you're using bang, they don't understand because everybody around them is using drug and maybe they're just okay. Some of them have not lost it. Some of them are still doing their businesses. So they wonder why you say that bang is a drug. So at the very onset, as I was saying earlier, we need to make it understandable to the most common audience that drug ni kitu mbaya. Ni mbaya kwa nini? Why is it that when you use drug, these are the consequences? But look at the question of parenting. It is not very popular, but I'll use this example. The other day when there was a case of femicide, there were a section of the population that were advancing the argument that we need to be more careful, we need to be more responsible with our lives. Then there was the bigger section of the society that was saying, no, I mean, it's not the responsibility of women to take care of themselves. It is the responsibility of everybody to do the right thing, which I agree with. However, what would you tell your sister? Or what would you tell your brother when your brother walks with gangs in the slums? I will tell them very clearly the consequences are that the police will kill you or the mob will kill you. You need to understand the consequences of every step that you take. This is what is escaping our parenting. We have parents who will tell you that, one, if you go out with your friends and they're smoking bang, you may be there and you'll not be smoking, but that's just okay. No, they need to understand that the influence of the people around you will actually have a bigger influence in your life. When you go out with strangers, they expose you to danger. However however much it is their responsibility not to kill you, they may kill you, and you need to understand that consequence. For the drugs, we need to explain to our people or to our young people that, one, when you smoke bang, you are going to run mad in due time or after some time. When you use alcohol, you're going to be rendered useless in the economy. Yes. You better understand that. But also to make them understand it better, it is not entirely bad to drink alcohol. That's why it's being stocked. It's not bad to have beer or something. People have had it and they're just okay. We need to be able to regulate how we deal with these things.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Angel.
Ayub, when you talk about the consequences, I think that's now the biggest elephant in the room, because we've lost so many of our young ones to drugs, and the education sector is hit the most. When we talk about 100% transition, one of the factors that prevent that from happening is because of drugs. When we look at the fallout of young girls out of school due to teenage pregnancies, is as a result of the social places they were engaging in that resulted to them getting pregnant. Yeah. Even when you talk about youth in the political space, the youth are dealing with so many issues, among them being drug abuse. And so we are seeing less and less of our most brilliant, our most educated, falling out of the economy, as he has mentioned, because there's no proper mentorship. And even when you talk about the cost of living, and that's where I think even the government itself is high on a type of drug, because they are oblivious to the issues of the day. We have taxes left, right, and center. We have that story on the front page of the Daily Nation talking about private universities not being able to give, they are refusing now to give certificates to students, to their former students or to their graduates, because the government owes them some sort of debt. This means that universities want students to go to the street so that the government can listen to them, so that they are paid their money and then they can give. They can issue out certificates. I mean, we are in the state of the nation is dark, and the government of the day seems to be high on something because they do not seem to see these problems. They're not addressing them adequately, and that's why I tell the youth of this country, tunafaa tukae sober, kwa sababu even our father of democracy, it is well in his own right to go and fight for his space in the AU as the AU chairperson. It is well within his right, and we support him for that. But we, the members of my generation, what is our leadership scope? Lazima tukae sober.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Ivy.
So when it comes to the aspect of the consequences, I believe that young people, first of all, need to understand the framework, or let's just say where we have put ourselves right now in the system of the generations that we're in. We need to understand that we are in evolving times where being exposed to so much information, being exposed to so much out there will lead you to have, most of the times, either an idle mind or an idle perspective leading to you to getting maybe now the use of substance abuse. Because, you know, we all know that an idle mind is the devil's workshop. We used to hear those stories when we were young, and I didn't even know that as you grow up that our parents were trying to tell us something through that. We need to understand that this aspect of having an idle mind is not supposed to be there. We need to create, like, for example, ICT solution-based spaces where young people can go brainstorm, figure out what is it that we can do, especially for the future generations, get to maybe strategize on the internet, get to understand what is it that young people can do to make the future better. And especially this is right now doing this would be better using the localized communities, because the localized communities need to understand that this is where the growth of substance abuse is actually grown. We also need to have preventative measures such as partnerships, paid partnerships with these influencers, so that they can come up with media content that can relate to the younger generation. This enables them to even understand what exactly what the drugs do to your system, how is it affects your body organs, what are the consequences of all of this. So these are some of the ideas that I feel that we should bring forward. Yeah. We should also understand that now we are in a generation where Africa is now uniting. We are entering into the Africa-Free Continental Trade Area. That means for open borders, open systems. That will mean that we are opening our borders to the continent, opening our borders to the people. So we need to start now looking at regulations, policy frameworks that can, as people are moving and goods are moving from one point to the other, we need to set out control systems, one-stop border shops that can be able to understand and adhere these regulations to put them into concept. Okay. So for me, I believe that this is something that we should do fight the aspect of substance abuse. It's a joint work. We need to work with the government. We need to work with the young people on the ground. We need to work with the systems so that to create enabling environments for these young people to know that we're in the 21st century. You need to be AI-centrified. You need to be AI-centric. You need to look for solutions rather than looking for the problems, but looking for the solutions to make a sustainable living.
Yeah, okay, yes, briefly. I'll start with the Courier.
Yes.
1 minute each before we sample the feedback. Please, the consequences.
Yes, we are losing our workforce, and we are headed in the wrong direction as a nation, and therefore we need to mitigate the issue of drug abuse.
Yes.
And as we have agreed here, we hope the government is going to look into that, and I believe it is looking into that, and we're going to have a sober nation. Yeah. Be blessed.
Yes, Anil.
My message goes to 3 people. First of all, the government. As young people, I speak on behalf, we are tired of being the proverbial chicken which is given pellets of grains on the eve of Christmas Day. We want to be involved in things that affect our lives. To these organizations like NACADA, stop these boardroom meetings that usually end there. Involve us. Personally, I'm sending my CV. And lastly, to the young people, I believe in one thing, that as a young person, in the spirit of stoicism, yes, you have to suffer. That is something that is there. You have to suffer a while as you make your space, or rather you fight for your space in this world. That should not be an excuse for you to lose your life and put it to the drains. And we should always remember that life is never easy, and it is only tough skins, or rather the fires that refine gold.
Yeah.
And the reason why stones are stones and diamonds are diamonds is because diamonds can stand pressure.
Okay.
So stand pressure as a diamond.
Thank you. Yes, Philip.
Ayub, the mother of all consequences is, as a young person, when you sink deep into drug and substance abuse, you greatly compromise the quality of your life. You greatly compromise the person you should be. And perhaps you, despite the level of education, you'll never get an opportunity to work anywhere or do anything. You'll never get an opportunity to raise a family. And I dare young people that want to continue living a life and seeing their second generation that drugs and substance abuse and absolute abuse of that is not an option. One reason why election participation, especially on the voting day, is compromised is either that these people were drunk the other day, or on the D-Day, they are not able to participate because they either branched somewhere before they went for the voting. Mm-hmm. So even to improve that quality and participation on the voting day, drugs and substance abuse must be not a second or a third option, but the list of options.
Okay, thank you. Let's now, yes, briefly.
Okay,
I need to sample the feedback.
Just a last one now. Yes. I think I have a message for my generation. My old man the other day was telling me that even in his generation, when he was at our age, there used to be a phrase for how life was difficult. He was trying to explain that even generations between us had a moment of how life is difficult. There's a wave of pessimism among my generation right now, where everybody is crying, things are difficult, we are not making it. When in my view, genuinely, I think things are much better. The distances our parents used to travel on foot were crazy. The kind of work our parents had to do to bring up over 16 to 20 children was crazy. At 30, you don't have no child, and you're complaining as though the world is ending. I mean, we need to be serious now going forward. Our generation must understand that things are going to be difficult, fine, but we also need to know our place in the growth of our lives. We cannot surrender all our responsibilities to the government, complaining about how the government is not doing this, we are dying. Fine, but well and good, you need to take responsibility and charge of your life at a personal level.
Thank you. Let's now sample the feedback. And Ibrahim, what do we have? Okay, the hashtag on X is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. This is what you have sent in the course of this broadcast. Diana Rotich, 14800 says, a concerning gap exists between high school and the university, where many young people in our country succumb to peer pressure and drug abuse. NACADA Kenya, it's crucial to initiate a program in the gap to save the next generation. We cannot afford to lose any more lives. Okello Mwalimu says eradication of illicit brews and drug abuse among the youth won't happen anytime soon. It's unfortunate that some of those entrusted with the responsibility of apprehending the sellers of such substances view the business's lucrative ventures. Our value system is so weak. Engineer Lazaro says emotive issues like the youth's joblessness posing more dangers to the nation than Al-Shabaab threats. We are losing the whole generation to drug abuse, especially in urban slums, due to hopelessness and idleness. Bob Otieno Owino says NACADA is a toothless dog. They haven't stopped excessive advertisement of alcohol in our local TV stations. Bars and alcoholic joints are being opened everywhere, left, right, near schools, estates, markets and churches too. Gode Barasawere says there must be a collaborative effort between the national government and the county governments in a bid to curb the drug abuse menace. Rehabilitative initiatives and incentives to get our youth useful and busy must be created at all costs. Jaya Musoma says approaches used to fight drug and substance abuse are poor. Millions have been spent on programs that are more political than rational in Mount Kenya, yet Western Kenya region leads at 26.4%, followed by Eastern at 20.7% and Nairobi at 19.1%, according to NACADA report. Babu Michelle K says the current fight against drugs is purely a misplaced one. It's not the real one. Consumption of such drugs is much complicated than we see it. We need even to address the issues of mental health. Most of these consumers are a desperate lot. Unnamed viewer, the one who taught Africans that education is the key to life is the one who bewitched us. Joblessness, drug abuse, immorality, indiscipline, and the desire for soft life has destroyed our country. Handle them decisively to save our country. Again, Okello Mwalimu says drug and substance abuse among the youth has been fueled by irresponsible and immoral parents who have failed to be good role models to their children. Some parents attend school, annual general meetings and academic clinics while drunk, whereas others drink and smoke in front of their children. Sad, he says. And key initiative 12011, taking a recall that some of the legal drugs is a business to other tycoons. It's better to understand that the best way is not shutting the places down, as they are a source of income to Kenyans. The best way is to introduce a de-addiction method. Diana Rotich again says a concerning gap, this was a repeat of the other one, exists between the high school and the university, where many young people in our country succumb to peer pressure and drug abuse. NACADA Kenya says, she says, it's crucial to initiate a program in the gap to save the next generation. We cannot afford to lose any more lives. We are past the time. Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, your time is all appreciated. Kuria Maina, thank you, all the way from Murang'a County. He is the Assistant Treasurer, Kupet, in Murang'a County. Anil Ogotu is the President, the Catholic University of Eastern Africa Law School. Thank you for your time. Philip Pande is Youth Inclusion Advisor. Philip, thank you and good morning. Thanks for coming. Angel Mbudia is the Chairperson, the Jubilee Youth League. Your time is appreciated. And Ivy Mushoki is the Global Youth Parliament, East Africa representative. We thank you for your time and giving us your account of what's happening in the country. Well, we thank you as well for waking up with us here on the broadcast. It's Gospel Friday. Coming up shortly with DJ Gigi. And I thank you for your company. We appreciate, of course, your worthy and valuable company here on the broadcast from Monday to Friday here on Daybreak. And the burial of Kelvin Kiptum, the 24-year-old Kenyan and world champion, will be live here on the broadcast, as it will be happening in the county of Elgeyo Marakwet. And it is expected that the head of state will be gracing the burial ceremony of the legend's life, which was cut short through a road accident. We thank you for your time. The hashtag has been Daybreak. The SMS code 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Hive of the Career. Good morning.